Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So there's another layer to when you start talking about conspiracies of mass accidents, like all the wildfires and the accidents with the air traffic controllers and pilots crashing planes, and random terrorist acts that just spontaneously come up and people try to blow up Tesla trucks, cyber trucks in front of Trump Tower and killing people in mass amounts at in New Orleans. Let's not forget about that. Surely there's not a government agency, because if you know government people, they're really not that smart to think that they're capable of the kind of planning it takes to do the level of evil the CIA gets accused of all the time. It's a stretch, because they're not that smart. They might have the ability to shut off power to a vehicle and cause it to remotely take it over and do terrible things. But their depth of ability to plan is not very deep. They're pretty shallow people on a good day. So how could you mass coordinate all this chaos? You went for years with Biden not having anything. I mean, we were a depleted country going in the wrong direction. But it was genuinely safe, and all kinds of crazy chaos wasn't happening every 5 seconds. And so why now? Why, with Trump in office, are all these bad things happening? So then you have to get into this next layer of antagonism that goes on. And speaking from personal experience, because it's been done to me, I can say that there's some merit to it. And I think that what you have is a lot of practitioners of occult activity who are trying to curse the Trump administration. And that might sound a little crazy until you know the details. But I was thinking about it pretty seriously. Like, I think about these things a lot. My daughters were on a trip together, and they happened to be in Salem, Massachusetts, and they were in a bookstore. And as they do often when they're thinking about me when they're out running around somewhere, they took a picture of the very strange items, very rare books in this bookstore. And it was a book because of Salem witch trials, so there's a lot of books on witchcraft, a lot of dedication to witchcraft in that community still to this day, because that's their tourist hook. So they were in this really nice bookstore, lots of really cool, unique books, and they were taking pictures of a lot of the spines of the books not facing out. They were all kind of done like a library where you just see the spine. And they took a picture of hundreds of these things, and I looked through them as they sent me a text, and I saw one that really struck my eye, and it was this one, The Lesser Key of Solomon. I recognize this one because I've read it before in various editions. I wanted this one by Joseph Peterson, who edited it, put it together, because it's one of the most complete versions of this very popular book that's out there. And I saw it by the green because I had my eye on it to pick it up sometime, and there they were in Salem at a bookstore dedicated to witches and magic, and there's the book. So that's how it would look to them, and I noticed it, and I said, get that one, that's the one I want. So this book supposedly was written by King Solomon himself, and it was passed down through the ages, through written texts of various kinds, and started picking up steam. This would be after the New Temple authors who kind of constructed the New Testament. Then you had the Christian movement that kind of came in after the Roman Empire collapsed. Islam came in and became a driving force in the region of Jerusalem. Things started evolving rapidly from there. You had the Crusades, and then you had people pouring through, especially Jewish rabbis passing along a lot of written oral texts from that period. So in about the 13th century, 14th, 15th, up to the 16th centuries, you had a lot of talk in medieval Europe about values from the days of Solomon and biblical text, and a Christian view of the world that was growing and becoming part of the power plays of Europe. So I tend to look at something like this. This book is an extension of the Testament of Solomon, which I've said I think should be in the Bible. However, I do think that it was probably a work of fiction myself. I think it was a work of fiction that just wanted to extend some of the lessons of the Bible. And you see that from a lot of the New Temple period writers, where the Apocrypha texts that did not make it to the Bible are very interesting, but you can see a yearning for creative input into a value system that was emerging from passed down texts from the Hebrew people. So that book, I think is, again, I think it's a work of fiction, and I'm very interested in it. I think it's a fascinating extension of the Testament of Solomon, which, if you know the story, was where Solomon controlled 72 demons, spiritual entities. In Japan, you'd call them kami, and Islam, in the Arab world, you'd call them jinn, and in Christian views of the world, you'd call them demons. The spiritual entities, ultra-terrestrials, creatures from another place that do all kinds of things. Some of them are good spirits, some of them are bad spirits. It's all relative to whatever's advantageous to everybody else. I think if you were in the world of the ayahuasca shaman, they would be some of those crazy characters that appear under psychedelic experience. And you see them and feel them and reverence to them in many cultures, including the music culture in America, where in Hollywood you have a lot of reverence paid to the same kind of demonic entities that they're talking about in King Solomon. King Solomon controlling those same demons with a ring he was given by God to control them, essentially, God's angels. And they built the Temple of Solomon for the first time. And there's a whole lot of things going on there. And it gets itself wrapped up in Masonic lore, passed down through different secret societies through the ages. And that book was used by Aleister Crowley to do a lot of crazy, wild things that are pretty far out there. And I've talked before how he took the Golden Dawn, the movement, with Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, and they settled in Pasadena, California eventually, and they would have all kinds of crazy sacrifices, the kind of stuff you see in Eyes Wide Shut, the movie, Stanley Kubrick film, to conjure up these spiritual aid. Now, my point of view on magic, anybody who tries to attempt to do magic and sorcery, the kind of stuff you see Gandalf doing in Lord of the Rings, or the Force users doing in Star Wars, it all kind of comes down from this lineage of King Solomon, the height of the Jewish reign of power, the time the Hebrew people had their act together the most, and had occupied the Promised Land in dedication to Yahweh. That was the best that they would ever be, and then they had a downfall, and that's what the Testament of Solomon's all about. Solomon had a lot of wives because he had a lot of power, and he was controlling all these demons, and he wanted one of his wives to sleep with him, and I've talked about how he sacrificed five grasshoppers because she told him to the god Moloch, and then the downfall of the Hebrew people then progressed. Solomon lost his power, the demons reigned back into the world, he lost control of them, and the rest is history up to the current time, essentially. I'm very fascinated with the story of Solomon, the keys, this idea of a ring that locks up and controls demons. In Japanese culture, you go see all the keyhole tombs everywhere. I would argue, and I have before, and I've argued it in videos I've done from Japan, that I think King Solomon's empire, his kingdom extended along the Silk Road as far as until they ran out of land and ended up on the islands of Japan. And this idea of locking up these demons, these spiritual entities, which they call their kami, and they still pay reverence to them with the same kind of reverence that you find in books like this book Solomon supposedly wrote, the Lesser Key. So there's a lot going on there, and I wanted the book, so my kids bought it for me. I read it, and there's new additions to it that are classic, but it's essentially an extension of the one that Aleister Crowley used to conjure up demons and spirits and all kinds of crazy things. And these are all people who moved. They came from Masonic lodges and advanced their own movements and did a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And anybody who's in Hollywood knows L. Ron Hubbard. He was wrapped up in all this stuff. Jack Parsons, the creator of NASA, essentially. NASA started with these guys. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. The bottom line is that book has a list of demons and efforts that you can make to conjure them up. They all have little signs, and you can draw these signs on floors and say certain magic words to get them to come to your spiritual aid. And just about any page you open up in this book, you'll see lots and lots of diagrams that you can use to enact and bring these things to life, bring them to serve you, just as King Solomon did when he was building the Temple of Solomon and ruling through his kingdom, however you want to term it, to get the spirit world to work for him instead of against him, in dedication to Yahweh. There's a lot of talk about God in here. They're not talking about the devil and any of this stuff, so it gets kind of confusing to people. But this is really, to me, this is really good esoteric stuff. But a lot of people believe it, and Aleister Crowley and the gang and people who are considered to be demon worshipers who have used this magic to gain access to the spirit world, to make them do your bidding. They believe it because they've had interactions that have confirmed their beliefs. So I might read this and say, well, that's an interesting work of fiction and an interesting idea of things. And how much does the power of belief actually manifest something into a reality? I think there's probably a lot to say about that. And is it these demons that they're conjuring up, or just spiritual entities that are wanting to play games with the human race and might take on the form of whatever you're trying to call? Kind of like a Ouija board, where the point of demons and the spirit world who have malicious intent, the real substance to what they do is they deceive. They don't really have a lot of power. You might, if you have an enemy you want to torture, you might call some demon to go hunt them in their dreams. They might visit them in some vision and torment them, but they really only have psychological advantage over you. They can't really hurt you in a physical reality. In some cases, they might be able to disassemble your cell structure and make you vulnerable to disease and a lot of that kind of stuff. But mainly what they do is they can get in your head and play games. And that's a lot of what these demons, as chronicled by King Solomon, that's how he was able to control so much in his empire, because each one of these demons is like a king of their own realm, and they had subordinates that reported to them. And I'm interested in all that because I like thinking about this, Elohim, the concept of the divine council, and how they either serve God or rebel against God. And when you have literature like this, you at least have writers thinking about these things in ways that are fascinating to the human consciousness. So the point of me mentioning all this is it's quite it's something to consider when you start thinking about mass evil as it spreads, and what kind of form does it take. to embody action. And is it happening? Well, I could say I know a lot of people have used books like that against me. And they've called up all kinds of things. They've put curses on me in every way you could possibly imagine that curses could be put on. And it always comes from these radical, crazy lefties. And when you go to a bookstore like my daughters went to, because they knew I'm interested in this kind of stuff, and they're there just kind of see, you hear the stories about the Salem witch trial, so they were in the area and they wanted to go see all these places. And you go to a bookstore and you see just how many people. It's a nice bookstore, and the book came in a very nice bag. And you can tell they really care about their subject matter, but they're really dedicated to this witchery stuff. And this is just one little place, and this is in New England, so there's lots of people who go there, and there's lots of people picking up books like this, and there's lots of people who go get themselves all worked up on drugs and try to communicate with the spirit world and try to seek supernatural aid, and they start trying to put curses on their enemies. Now, I'm obviously still here. I've said I know for a fact that I've had many of these kinds of curses put on me. Just because somebody does something like that, it doesn't mean that you're a victim to it. You can take all kinds of countermeasures to override it. And I say a lot of these tricksters, the demons that are talked about in the Testament of Solomon, and then of course in this lesser key of Solomon, mostly what they do is psychological to people. You can easily override them if you have a strong personality. So if you have some crazy demon appear in your dream to tell you to do something stupid or get you to trick you to do something that's not to your best advantage, usually you can say, no, I'm not going to follow you. I don't listen to you. You're not the boss of me. And they'll go about their way because they really don't have any power over you. But they give the illusion of power. So I know it's happened to me. I know a lot of people resort to that kind of thing, and there's a lot of material out there. And if you have a certain percentage of the population that wants to seek supernatural aid, my policy on magic is this week. I don't ask for directions to go to a supermarket or a gas station, let alone ask some spirit world entity to help me out with wealth, health, or fighting my battles for me. I would never do that. But there are a lot of people who would. And there's a lot of energy out there. There's a lot of crazy radical leftist people who are not happy that the Trump administration's in power, and they're sitting around in their homes and they're doing these rituals and they're reading books like this one and trying to conjure up spirits to come and do bad things. And if you see a lot of bad stuff happening, I would say that you have to kind of look to these attempts, this mental energy that a lot of these bad characters apply to these circumstances to try and bring trouble to the Trump administration and to try and keep America from being great again by bringing a lot of tragedy and sorrow to people's minds to keep it from growing into some goodness. Don't be surprised if that's not what you find behind a lot of these terrible plane crashes and wildfires and border violence and whatever you see. You're seeing the work of a vast evil at play. And when you have a 1 or 2% of your total population that's reading books like that, and they're getting books on magic, and they're in these secret societies, and they're sitting around doing these chants, just like they tell you to do in this book, and you have these members of the spirit world that are enchanted with the attention, and all you have to do is go whisper in the ear of an enemy and try to coax them into their demise, or get them to fly a plane or a helicopter into a plane when they should be thinking about what's really in front of them, and their minds get taken over by some interdimensional character that has malice in its mind. I think you have to start thinking that that's some of the origin to some of this stuff. And I know about it because of personal experience. And I read books like this, and I want to know all the stories, how they connect, and I want to understand the intent behind human behavior. But it's an interesting book. I treasure it. I like things like that. Again, this book here represents how King Solomon from the Bible ruled over demons and made them do good work to perpetuate his kingdom. And God was totally okay with it because he gave him a ring to control them with. And I think a lot of that culture spans all over the region of the time, talking 1000 BC, essentially, and then along the Silk Road to where it even interacted with Japan. And if we did more archaeology in China and Russia and Ukraine, I tend to think that a lot of the bad stuff that goes on in Ukraine is to hide a lot of the archaeology that's waiting to be discovered there in Afghanistan and Pakistan, all these areas along the Silk Road where these ideas migrated. You find that they're very universal and believed heavily to this day. And if I didn't see it myself in Japan, perfectly logical people stopping at a street corner to pray to some spirits to give them good luck that day, and don't burn them with evil. Keep evil away from their families. And they have all these incense burners going around. You put the smoke in your face to try and take it in and communicate with these entities. It's common all over the world. And when you start seeing vast evils displayed recklessly, as we are seeing here lately, I think you have to start looking at the kind of people who are out there trying to conjure up evil spirits to play a political role in our here and now. And that the vast amount of evil we're witnessing isn't necessarily terrestrial. It might be invoked by people who are victimized status, that want magic to give them one up on all their enemies in life, and they certainly will try to do it, and the tools are out there to apparently do it if you believe in it. I could read a lot of this stuff in these books, and it wouldn't, spirits wouldn't conjure up to meet with me because I don't believe it, and I believe, again, it's a work of fiction meant to illustrate more power and dominance that King Solomon had in his empire, as a nice story to take a historic character and read his writings from the things he did while he served as the king, and add more to it through time, because creative minds wanted more than what the Bible was providing. They wanted to take the story to another level, and they put their own human input into it. But there's people who believe it, and the power of belief, I would say, can't be underestimated. And if you want to believe something, there's always something out there that's going to be attracted to what you're thinking. And when like I say with the ayahuasca experiences, where you can have psychedelic visions into some other realm of reality, and there's characters there that seem to be totally independent intelligence with their own political motivations, and if they can align with you for a minute, they certainly will do it. And I think we see that a lot, and I think we're seeing that in these days with the Trump administration coming in. There's thousands and thousands of people sitting in their homes reading these incantations to the spirit world, hoping to create a crisis that will overwhelm the Trump administration and stop them from doing the good things they want to do, and stopping us from making America great again. I think there's a real desire for a lot of these kinds of people to reach into the spirit world and get help. And there's a lot of characters in that world, as all history has shown, that are perfectly willing to do anything for the attention. They'll do good or evil. They'll do whatever it takes if someone will just pay attention to them. And that's how a lot of bad things happen, and have happened all through history. Pretty interesting. Anyway, good book. I like that my kids look out for me. I like this version of this book. Yeah, really good stuff. Detailing the ceremonial art of commanding spirits, both good and evil. Good reading, but a lot of people believe it, and I think there's some truth behind some of this stuff that's probably behind a lot of the chaos we're seeing in our modern world. And we should deal with it along those lines. Well, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you ever read my book, Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.